when we come to eating it, we can remove our bone. Some people like to just chew on this. You can chew on your bone, yeah. You can, there's a good flavour. No, there genuinely is. Welcome to the ultimate guide to cooking steak with Hawksmoor. Today we're going to go into identifying what makes a great piece of beef to start cooking with. We're going to talk about the different cuts and their different qualities, and then we're going to show you how to cook the steaks, and then we're going to break down how they should be looking and tasting after they've been cooked. Certainly you have to start with a great piece of beef. We use only grass-fed British beef, and then 35-day dry aged. It just has a richer flavour. We use charcoal as our fuel, and then when we're talking about the charcoal, you talk about the perfect temperature. So if our temperature of the charcoal is too high, it will burn the steak, it will colour too quickly, it'll give it an acrid flavour. We turn our steaks multiple times during its cooking process because we want an even colour. So that makes it a hell of a lot more intense when you're cooking it, but that's how we get our unique flavour profile for our steaks here. Post-cooking of the steak, so we've got our perfect colour, we've got our perfect temperature that we like to use in our steaks. So we use temperature probes for our steaks because we're so obsessed with getting them perfect. So you can use touch and feel. You'll see people describe like placing a finger here or here or here and how your palm feels. We give you like a different cooking guide, and it is useful. We then let that steak relax over time and it becomes softer and more tender. A little bit of the juice that remains in the steak will run out of it. We talk about our grill chefs as being something that's necessary to cook a perfect steak because it is not easy to cook the steaks here. You're talking about 30 to 40 steaks on his grill, each with a different cooking requirement from the customer, each at a different weighed steak, so he has to hold all those things in his mind, and it is not easy, and it requires a very high level of skill and experience. So this is king of the steakhouse, the Chateaubriand. We sell a lot of this when it comes to graduations, weekends. I think when people are out to celebrate, I think it's always been that steak, and it always will be that steak. The Chateaubriand is so expensive because it's from the fillet, which you only get 2 fillets per cow, and it's only a very small percentage of the animal. The tenderness and the amount of like how lean it is also makes it also more expensive. A beautiful piece of meat, a little more hardy than say a tornado. It's got a little bit more fat going on. So for our process of how we cook steaks on the fire, I think it's better suited. So it gives it more of a chance to get that sort of smoke in there, the deeper flavour from the charcoal, and getting that golden brown sort of colour onto our steaks, but the flavour that gives the steak, the Chateaubriand really benefits that. And then to serve it, we will just cut across and you get lovely slabs of perfectly cooked steak. We've gone for medium rare with this. It comes down to preference, but we feel that's the best cooking temperature for a Chateaubriand. It gives a better amount of time to get like a good char and cooking around the large piece of beef. And you can see here your pieces of beef just perfect, just still beautiful and pink, super tender, lovely and juicy. So we've paired this with our Caesar salad and anchovy hollandaise. So the combination of beef and anchovy is something Hawksmoor uses a lot. If you've got any of the Hawksmoor cookbooks, you'll see it's incorporated in a lot of the recipes that we do. It really amplifies the flavour of the beef and adds another layer of umami to it as well. Certain cuts, they have a grain. And you need to cut across the grain. This is a cut where you very much need to do that, because if you don't do that, the steak can be a lot tougher. So a Chateaubriand, you can see here, this is the whole piece of the Chateaubriand, and the grain is running across the steak. So if you imagine it runs like parallel like that, you can actually see across this top part here, the grain is going across, and then when you want to slice, you want to go across the grain, so the pieces of the steak break apart easier. It's just more tender. So next cut we have our rump steak. From Hawksmoor we take from what we call the D rump, so we use the whole of the rump. This is taken from the rear of the animal. The dry aging process that we do here really benefits this cut the most because of the amount of fat it has on that cut. As a muscle, it does more work than the other cut, so it is I'd describe it as a firmer texture. There is, I would say, 5 muscle sections to a rump. You have your spider, which is a very fatty section of the rump. We actually remove that. The top of the rump sometimes known as the cap. We remove that, and that's what we actually roast for what we serve as our roast here. So that has the highest amount of fat on it. And then below that, you have what we would call the 3 steak sections. So we actually, it is quite a big piece when it's first exposed, but then we take it down into 3 individual muscles, and then we cut our steaks across those, so you get like a tornado shape similar to a fillet steak. But it's had all the sinew removed, a lot of the unpleasant fat that people sometimes associate with rump steak has been removed as well, so you get a much leaner piece. It also benefits from that depth of flavour and that bit of fat that it has. We've got a lovely bit of fat here running along the top, and then again we've got our beautiful colour all the way around, Maillard reaction all around the steak. You can see we've got a lovely lean section. We've aimed at sort of like medium rare to medium for this rump. Cooked rare, a rump can be a little bit too chewy. It is a more chewy cut of beef compared to the other cuts that we've served. I love this cut because of the fact it has the amount of fat that it does on the outside. It gets the dry aging process, really affects the flavour in a better way, so you get the deeper dry age flavour, more funky beef flavour is really, really rich in the rump. So we paired this today, classic lineup, beef dripping chips, fried eggs and peppercorn sauce. Our fried eggs that we serve here, we do like Spanish styles. We crisp up the bottom of the eggs and get like little crispy edges around the outside. And then just the classic peppercorn sauce, works beautifully with it. Maillard reaction is a French term. It's basically a chemical reaction that happens when you put raw beef against a high temperature. You can achieve Maillard reaction by cooking beef, you know, in a pan, having a smoking hot pan, or how we cook ours here is obviously over the charcoal. So when you look at the science of it, I think it has about 20 plus flavour reactions. So it just gives beef in particular, when cooked in that way, just has so much more depth of flavour. So that's what we do. We chase a Maillard finish on all the outside of our steaks because it just gives it that extra flavour. So next we have sirloin steak going towards the back section of the animal, between the rump and the ribeye. So it would be here, say for example on a human. When we talk about sirloin at Hawksmoor, we talk about best of both. So some cuts very lean, your fillet steak for example, some cuts deeper in fat, so your ribeye. And this has a little bit of everything, so it's a more lean cut in terms of the volume of meat that it has, but it also has this beautiful layer of fat running along the top. So you get the extra bit of flavour, and when it's cooked over the charcoal here, it really benefits from sort of being rendered down over those coals and gives it just an extra layer of flavour. This is our steak, which we have cooked to medium to rare. So yeah, you can see on the cross section here as well, you've got your lovely piece of meat, and then we've got this little piece of beautifully rendered fat, caramelized on end as well. It's just going to get a little flavour kick from that on every slice that you have. Talking about before, well-rested steak shouldn't have lots of juice running out of it when it's been sliced. There's a bit of moisture. You don't want no moisture on the steak coming out. And then we've paired this in the restaurant with a roasted bone marrow and béarnaise sauce. So simple rule of thumb for resting a steak is basically as long as you've cooked it. So if you've spent 10 minutes cooking your steak, it's a good idea to rest it for 10 minutes. So if it's a big cut and you've spent half an hour cooking it, rest it for a good half an hour. And then always, before you serve, give them a little attack of heat, either a little flash under the grill or quick flash through the oven just to get it up to a hot temperature again. Because you're still going to get the benefit of having rested the steak. It won't then sort of recreate the cooking process and making it tough again. You just get the heat into it and then serve it. So next we have 2 cuts. So we have T-bone and Porterhouse, but they're actually very similar. They're taken from exactly the same part of the animal. So if you pictured this on the animal, it would be like, there would be the backbone running along. Here's your sirloin that goes along the top and a fillet steak underneath. If you look at this one, the ratio of fillet is less. So we would grade that as a T-bone steak, and looking at your Porterhouse, the ratio of your fillet steak is higher, so we grade that as a Porterhouse. Personally, I think the big winner in this steak, when cooked in that way, is the sirloin. Yes, the fillet is delicious, but I think the sirloin really benefits from being cooked in this way. We would separate the sirloin from the steak, slice along, and then we would separate the fillet as well, slice along that, and then we would serve it in that way to the customer. So here you can see really big piece of fillet steak. so ratio much higher, so we would class this as a Porterhouse. Got wonderful char, but we also get the benefit of the bone cooking alongside these two cuts. It protects the two steaks whilst it's cooking, but it also benefits them by giving the flavour into it as well. So you get a deeper flavour. For me personally, I feel that the sirloin is the biggest winner of being cooked on the bone like this. When we come to eating it, we can remove our bone. Some people like to just chew on this, because it has got little bits of meat attached to it. And then here's the two cuts. So I'll take a section from the sirloin. So here you can see the sirloin, we've sliced across it. You've got that lovely piece of sirloin there with the fat attached at the end. But this does have the added benefit of the fact it's been cooked alongside this, like the bone, and it's got an extra layer of flavour. And then we take a section here from the fillet. So you can see, cut across the fillet, and then you can see the difference in the two cuts, but both cooked beautifully. And you can see here like this lovely char with the lovely pink meat. So we paired this today with our macaroni cheese. It's got 5 types of cheeses in total, and then we bake that in the oven. It goes beautifully with this steak.
Is the knife important?
Yeah, the knife is really important. Need a really sharp knife. Some people are scared of a sharp knife, but it's actually more dangerous to have a blunt knife because it's more likely to get stuck in the thing that you're cutting and fly out and into your hand. So yes, you do have a greater danger of a sharp blade cutting you, but you just need to take a little bit of care with it. But you get like these lovely clean slices. You only get that with a good knife. So our next cut is ribeye steak. So this is a lot of people's favourite cut because of its qualities that it has. So it's a lot of chefs' favourite cut. So it has more fat than a lot of the other cuts. So you have the eye of the steak here. In a ribeye, you'll classically have really good marble in here and a little bit of extra flavour in that section. And it has this section here, which we call the decal, which is a little bit higher in fat again, and that adds another layer of flavour to the steak. And the extra fat in the steak, when cooked, gives it a slightly more sort of gelatinous and more melty mouthfeel. Due to the higher fat content, really benefits cooked over the coals at a high temperature. It just gives it an extra layer of flavour. First thing we're looking for, that beautiful colour, that beautiful golden brown. This is just absolutely perfect. You can just see that deep, rich golden brown colour there. And on the sides as well, you can see here the sides of this steak have been caramelised beautifully. It's well rested, it's nice, it's relaxed, it feels lovely and tender, so we're good to go, good to carve. So you can see the cross section of the steak, exactly what we're talking about there. So the eye of the meat, you have a leaner piece here. You can still see really good marbling. Big fatty section, you can see here, you've got that little piece there. That's a great example of like a cross section of a cut ribeye. We paired this today with the English salad and the Stichelton Hollandaise. Just this really beautiful fatty piece of beef, sort of like, it's going to have enough character, so something clean with it. Just goes beautifully with the meat. Stichelton cheese, melt it down, but also keep some of the chunks in there and just mix that through Hollandaise sauce. It's just beautiful sauce. Goes beautiful with any steak, but we paired it with the ribeye today. Where to rest your steak is a really good question. I actually like to rest mine at my grill tray, you know, from your simple home oven. That's great because it lets the juice run out of the steaks. The juice that run from the steak, I'll use that at home, so that's a nice easy one. You know, you can rest it on a board here, but if you rest the steak on the board here, the juices are just going to be running off it as it's sitting there resting. Going to make a mess that you've got to clean up, and also you're just going to lose your juice. Use your juice, don't lose your juice. Next we have our #1 selling steak in Hawksmoor, the fillet steak, taken from the fillet muscle. So, as I said earlier about the Chateaubriand, there's 3 sections to a fillet, the Chateaubriand. The tornado section, which is the section we take these steaks from, which is the centre part of the fillet. And at the end you have your tail. So you will get on the average from each whole fillet, say 4 steaks of this kind. And yeah, it's our most desired steak here. So fillet steak from the laziest muscle does very little work, so it is the most tender cut you can have from the cow. When you have cooked the steak to your required sort of cuisson, we recommend sort of rare to medium rare for this. You will just have then just lovely slices of very, very tender beef. Again, what we're looking for at this stage, we're looking for that beautiful colour, and you can see there that it's just perfectly coloured all the way around the steak. Again, nice well-rested steak, there's no juices running out of it. This is exactly what we wanted. Lovely and pink. Depending on how thick the steak is will dictate how long you cook it for. The fatter the steak, the longer it's going to take to cook to get your required temperature in the middle. It is difficult if you're talking about a steak that's very thin. If this steak was very, very thin but much wider, it would be really difficult to get this sort of finish on it. With anything or whatever you're cooking, it's just trial and error. You've got to figure out how to cook things. On an average time to cooking a fillet steak of this size, you're probably cooking it for about 5 to 6 minutes. So we have paired it with lobster and garlic butter. So a bit of a flamboyant combination, but it is just so good. I've served this with a side of garlic butter. We also roast our lobsters with the garlic butter as well. Your fillet steak being quite lean, just likes having that sort of buttery, rich lobster going with it. It's the best surf and turf you'll ever see, yeah. Another thing at Hawksmoor that we do is we also put the same amount of love and effort into the sides of the steak. So focus on the sides for 2 reasons. Firstly, if you're cooking the steak and you're putting the temperature into the steak, you're putting the temperature in here on the bottom, and then from the sides as well, it's helping it cook evenly. Mainly for me is from the flavour perspective. If you put all this work into getting the colour and the flavour onto the top and the bottom of the steak, you want to do it to the sides as well, so it's an even more intense flavour. This cut is my favourite cut. This is the prime rib. It's my favourite steak at Hawksmoor because of the way we cook steaks. I think it just is perfectly suited to this cut. It sits sort of at the middle part of the animal. So at the front part of like the halfway stage of the animal, around the rib stage, what you have is the rib eye, which is this section here. And then we also have this set part, which is the decal. When it's cooking, the bone will sort of act to protect the meat. It also adds flavour to it. You get gelatine coming off the bone, so it just makes it even more luxurious. So here you can see, I'll show you a couple of pieces actually. This is a cross section from the centre of the steak. You can see this is right in the prime bit of ribeye area. Got your eye of your meat here. Good section of fat, and then the end piece there. And then I'll show you a piece taken from the decal area. As you can see, it's much higher in fat, which to me is very exciting. I know that's not for everybody, but still got that nice piece of meat attached to it. And coming down towards the bottom end, you have sort of much more of like a 50-50 split of like your eye and your other slightly fattier area. It's just like each of the sections is just a journey, and the depth of flavour is just super intense all throughout the prime rib. It actually, like a big piece of meat like this for me, is happily can be shared between say 4 people. Each piece is just so rich and so intense that you really don't need so much of it. We paired this today, my personal favourite side, the Tunworth mash. Quite simply, mashed potato with a wedge of Tunworth cheese, which is like a British version of camembert, so super deep flavours, and then that gets slowly roasted with the mashed potato, and then bone marrow gravy. So roasted bone marrow, to me they're all huge flavours. Pair them together is just like very, very intense combinations. For us, it's just quite simply salt. Salt we use is Malden sea salt, so it's a naturally forming salt. It's taken from estuaries. They then sort of sift the salt from the water, and then it dries in these trays, and you get little sort of triangle crystals. If you actually ever look at Malden sea salt, and you can see those little triangle shapes, that's how it comes. So we had a hell of a lot of salt to that steak, and then during our cooking process here, a lot of it will come off, but we give it a very large amount of salt. This is a fillet tail, and this is the very end part of the fillet. So it's always a little tricky to know what to do with this cut of beef. My favourite dish that we do here with this is the cast iron skillet, where we cut across the fillet steak. We open it out, call it butterflying, rub a little bit of flour on it, and then we cook it in a pan, smoking hot beef dripping. We sear the fillet on a very high temperature, flash it in our Josper oven, which is our coal-fueled oven that we have here. It's an extremely high temperature, just browns off those onions, makes the whole thing a little bit crispy and gives it that little charcoal kick and a little bit of fresh parsley, and that's how we serve it. But I just think it's an incredible way to use your tail section of the fillet. So this is our cast iron, as we discussed earlier on, taken from the end of the fillet. We have the fillet tails. So we paired this today with the cream spinach, our famous cream spinach. So we make a cream infusion, infuse it with rosemary, garlic, nutmeg, cayenne pepper, and then that gets mixed through the cream infusion, and then we warm that through, a little bit of salt. Super rich, super delicious, and just pairs beautifully with this. Have we done it on time? Yeah. Look at that. 48 seconds to spare.